one of the things I realized most when I asked people, what do you want? The number one was to be heard and believed. That first, before it was about, well, solve the problem, let's go sue someone. It was like, I want to be believed. Because most workplaces, that doesn't happen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Embracing Only show. We are here back again, Archita and I, and today we have another amazing guest that we can't wait for you to hear from. So today we have Animah joining us, and Animah is a passionate advocate for ethical leadership, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. With over 2 decades of experience in the oil and gas industry as in-house counsel, I can just imagine how sporty that was. Brings a wealth of practical knowledge to her current role as the founder of Speak Up at Work. Originally from Malaysia, Animah now bases herself in London. This global perspective informs her approach to addressing workplace issues across diverse cultural contexts. As a speaker, writer, and consultant, Animah focuses on creating psychological safe workplaces where employees feel empowered to voice their concerns. Her expertise spans areas such as speaking up, ethical leadership, and fostering inclusive environments that value diverse perspectives. Oh, how do we need your work these days, Animah? And Animah's work is particularly noteworthy for its intersectional approach, addressing the complex interplay of gender, race, and cultural identity in corporate settings. She has served as a judge for the UN Women's Empowerment Principles Award, where she evaluates organizations on their commitment to supporting real women's lives and gender equality. Through her thought-provoking writings and engaging talks, Animah challenges stereotypes and advocates for systemic change in organization. She has found herself as an only being a Muslim woman in the corporate world, which adds depth to her insights, allowing her to address issues of diversity and inclusion from a personal as well as professional standpoint. Animah, welcome to Embracing Only.
Thank you. Thank you, Olivia and Archita. I'm glad to be here.
We are so excited to have you, Animah. I met you somewhere on the LinkedIn street through Linda Crockett and the workplace and bullying work that we did way back in the day. And then I realized you're a fellow Clubhouse soldier as well. And you had a whole depth of time you spent out there and really building your thought leadership and bringing so many people along the journey. The depth of your work has been really broad and has been so impactful. And we're so grateful for that. So we'd love to hear what was the catalyst that helped drive this all the way from being a counsel in oil and gas to the anti-racism work you do today.
So that was an amazing introduction. I didn't even recognize you were talking about, but thank you so much. That was stunning. I'm Malaysian British. So I've worked all my life basically in Malaysia, and I was a Malaysian lawyer, a qualified lawyer there. And I did practice for 9 years, and then I was in oil and gas for 14 years. So it adds up that way. So one of the things I think, once I went into the oil and gas industry, and they really take lawyers seriously there. And one of the things I noticed, because I'd be doing things like investigations or finding out things and stuff like that. And I was also in a country at the moment that was having its real activist blossoming, so to speak. Malaysia was going through this very strong anti-corruption movement simply because our Prime Minister at the time, Najib Razak, was embroiled in the rather scandalous 1MDB saga, which involved Goldman Sachs and the Wolf of Wall Street and all that kind of thing. So you had elements of Hollywood, you had elements of big financial bond issuers, but this was money that was being siphoned off, supposedly for the Sovereign Wealth Fund, but was being used for his war chest and other things as well. But as Malaysians were discovering this, and it was breaking, the news was breaking, of course, as you can imagine, there was huge outcry. There were huge protests on the street. So I've become very used to street protests. So what's happening now in the West is, okay, all right, bring it on. So I grew up, also was in the Human Rights Committee of the Bar Council, Malaysian Bar as well, quite active there. So I've been very used to speaking up on issues. So when I went into the oil and gas industry, and this within the country, there was all this anger about the corruption. I was like telling people at work, colleagues and all that, when I did my talk, ethics talks, we call them, like you don't take bribes and that kind of thing. I said, look, if you're really angry about what's happening out there, what can you do within the company? And so I encourage people to speak up, to use the whistleblowing channel and that kind of thing. At the same time, I would oversee various issues or investigations. And one of the things that really perplexed me is that people know when things are harmful or bad, whether things are unsafe or whether there's something that could be possibly misconduct, corruption, or so on, or harassment, right? Whether it's sexual harassment. Everyone knows what's wrong. But what struck me is if you knew about it, if you were a witness, you found out something, or maybe you weren't the one experiencing it, why didn't you report it? And this always first, it used to puzzle me. And so I'd attend interviews and all that, ask them questions. And very similar reasons came up. And in fact, if you look at whistleblowing hotlines, they give similar findings. It's fear. It's fear, like they don't know who to trust. They're afraid they're going to get into trouble. They might lose their job. There'll be some kind of backlash. And the other one is futility. So futility meaning, well, I've reported it before and nothing's happened, so why should I? That kind of thing. So those two combined actually really impact people speaking up on harm that they see. So I was like, okay, so for me, I wasn't so concerned about the people who actually did the harm. I was more interested in the systems and the culture that allowed that to happen. So it's about, let's change, it's systemic, let's look at that. Or it's a leadership issue, let's look at that. Why are people feeling afraid? What's going on here? So I'd be focused on helping organizations, as you said in your introduction, address the psychological safety. And then also ask, what is driving certain behaviors? Do you have targets that would cause employees to make shortcuts? So instead of something, oh, it costs too much money to make it safe. So, well, we don't think anything's going to happen. So let's take the easy route and then something does happen. So, but the systems and the reward systems are such that people feel they have to do that. So human beings, it's like, well, what's the easy way to do things? And then I found the more I started speaking about it, and it was years ago I started writing on LinkedIn, actually about BP, Deepwater Horizon, because I came from oil and gas in the Gulf of Mexico. And I did a series of free articles and it went absolutely viral. I was hardly active on LinkedIn. I would be getting DMs from rig workers in Texas who would open up and tell me stuff. And so hefty white men would be writing to me from Texas, this little Muslim woman, and saying, hey, that really resonates. This is the problem I have. And they'd open up. And then when I started writing about sexual harassment, and this was when, even before Me Too became a thing, I would have more women than men writing to me and telling me things. And I'm like, okay, there is almost like a need for a space for people just to open up and be heard. Because one of the things I realized most when I asked people, what do you want? The number one was to be heard and believed. Yeah. That first, before it was about, well, solve the problem, let's go sue someone. It was like, I want to be believed. Because most workplaces, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to double click on this, Animah, because Archita and I have two kind of very different approaches to the toxic things that happen in the workplace. And I think my fundamental belief is these corporations and the systems that exist in these corporations are really perpetuated by the type of people that are attracted to said toxicity, that it works for them for whatever reason. And so they uphold the system, right? So here you are pointing out the flaws in the system and attempting to have the people who live within the system have their voices heard. But the system itself doesn't survive if there aren't people that want it to survive. So how do you reconcile those two things? What do you tell the folks that are embedded in the system right now that want it to change, but aren't necessarily, and this is really speaking to your work with corporations, how do you get them to A, acknowledge the facts as you present them, and B, chip through all of their biases to be like, no, it needs to change, even if the change no longer centers you or benefits you completely? How do you make that connection? Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Cream. If you are a corporate girly and you are struggling, you're feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling underpaid, overqualified, you're struggling with your boss, or bigger yet, you're even trying to clearly articulate what it is that you want from your corporate career, I am the coach for you. So if you're ambitious and you've got goals to accomplish and you want to accomplish them quickly, check out my website, oliviacream.com. I would love to help you reach your goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Archita Fritz, your other host of the Embracing Only podcast. If you're ready to leave corporate or you've changed a couple of corporate jobs and want to start a profitable side brilliance, you've made the decision, but you feel unsure of the next steps, here's how I can help you. I can guide you through a successful transition to entrepreneurship to help turn those ideas into profit. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit me on architafritz.com to accelerate your empowered transitions. Now, back to the episode.
That's a really good question. It's all the different perspectives. So this is the perspective of the person who's been harmed, like I've been harmed and no one's listening to me. And it's not for us to say, well, you need to speak up, because they can continue to be harmed. Retaliation is very real. Achita, you know this through the work that you do as well. And I realized when people will come to me, it's like everyone expects magic answers, like I'd have the solution. And the first few questions I would ask them is that, financially, are you okay? Because if you report this, and this is what the environment's, it's really toxic, and you don't have allies and the leadership don't care, there's a very real risk that you might actually lose your job. Because also there's the emotional impact on them too. Because although some would say, yes, I can bear that legal route and all that, but emotionally it's of trauma. And of course, Archita, you mentioned Linda Crockett, and that's what she talks about when it comes to like workplace bullying, is the trauma that comes with it. As someone who's been bullied has to work through the system. So this is why I realized that for me, what people who were being harmed needed, and I couldn't provide this. It's not like I was being able to walk them through that, because it happens to so many people. What I realized is you can all support each other. So this is where community came in. So I created, now we've got the Speaking Up Network. The network is really broad. It's every continent, and people talk to each other. And whether they're talking about disability justice, for example, or racial issues, they can communicate with each other and feel supported at that level. The main thing I say to everyone is, you're not alone. You might think you're the only one who's experiencing that. And that's not surprising because nobody talks about it. But you would be amazed the moment you open up in a safe space and share your stories, that other people who go, oh my God, that happened to me too. I'm here. What do you need? So there was that kind of support. And a lot of it is emotional support. And if people get that, it makes it easier for them to take the next step. We're working with a multinational client and their senior leadership team. And one of the things we did was, because we'd spoken to so many people at different levels in different countries around certain issues, but a lot of it to do with psychological safety. They're like, I don't feel safe. There's been so many changes. I don't know where. So all kinds of things coming up, and including women feeling that they were not being treated in the same way as men. There was a lot of bias, right? There was sexism, but you get this everywhere, right? So we had a few sessions with the predominantly male leadership team. And basically what we did is we produced a series of sketches, which was actually performed by professional actors, which was based on something actually I wrote. And I think this is because I'm also a writer. I did playwriting also as a hobby, but I managed to use it professionally
writer,
too.
everything. I love it.
So all these conversations that we had with various people, we put it in certain characters and we played it for the leadership. And they were like, you've just held a mirror. Is this us? This is us, isn't it? Okay, so we hold that space, because it's not just, well, here it is and we're going to go away, but let's open up and what are you feeling about this? And I think so the main thing is a lot of leadership don't realize. And it's also, we'd ask them, well, how did you feel when you first started working, for example, that kind of thing. Or some of them, if it was about women, they'd go and speak, they'd go back and they'd ask their wives or their daughters, whatever, oh my God, this happens to you. How can I not know? And that's why hashtag Me Too was really powerful when it first broke out, is because men had no idea. And I will confess that I myself, not being Black, had no idea what Black people had gone through until Black Lives Matter exploded, right after George Floyd's murder. And I went, oh my God, I had no idea. But what was happening was the space for people to tell their stories, to be seen, heard. Because if I didn't know, how could I then do something about it? So this is the first thing. When it comes to leadership, they really need to know and they need to feel. But the main thing is they need to care about it. Actually, many people in leadership positions do care. It's just that they don't often have the space to step back and really, with everything that's going on, there's a lot of firefighting, there's a lot of demands going on. Many people together, so it's not just one leader, it's the entire leadership team of an organization, may not have the time and space to really step back and ask themselves the difficult questions. Because individually, they do care. And I remember, this was one of my clients. I remember somebody who everybody said, oh, this guy is really tough. He's sexist. He's whatever. He was almost like written up. He was the one in a team that displayed the most reflection and self-awareness. And we were like, wow.
Let's dig a little bit deeper into that, right, Animah? So I think you were in a podcast a while ago, and you speak about redeeming bullying leaders, but also differentiating between strong, assertive, and bullying behavior. So could you help unpack those three kind of behaviors and then talk about when you do then identify bullying behavior? Again, this is where Olivia and I differ. I'm just like, I think Olivia would be like, I'm done, you're written off. And I'm just like, oh, there's still hope.
Actually, I love that podcast. And I just want to first pay tribute to the man who hosted it, Michael Banks. He passed away a few months ago, and I just want to honor him as well. It was just beautiful the way he'd asked the questions and allowed me to open up. And what I shared for your listeners in that podcast was that I was bullied as a young lawyer, and seriously, in the legal profession, this is so common. And so in my mind, this is how you train young lawyers. So as I got a bit more senior, and after 2 years, you consider, oh, you're more senior, you've now got lawyers under you kind of thing. I took on that mantle of bullying because that was the way to train them. Because in my head is, well, if you can't handle me, how are you going to stand before a really strong judge who's yelling at you? You have to withstand all this. It's a tough profession. Deal with it. Now I've changed, which is basically like, why does it have to be a tough profession? Why are we so nasty to each other? We can change it. But then that's how I was. And it was only when I actually moved to oil and gas and I joined Schlumberger, and Jamal, who was my first boss, and he knows I tell this story a lot. In the first week, I said something to one of the people who reported to me, and then she got very upset. She went running to the toilet and she was in tears. And I was like, what did I say? Oh my God, you couldn't stand in front of a judge. And then I got called into his office. And he was the general manager of several countries in Schlumberger. And he called me into the office and said, I don't know what you all do in a law firm, but this is entirely not acceptable in Schlumberger. So you can see this is leadership in action, right? Of course, at that time, I just wanted to like swallow me up and take me. But essentially after that, I went through this journey of basically learning how to do leadership properly, not yell at people or whatever, or make sarcastic remarks, which is what I'd done. But I think it was also a journey of self-awareness. And this is why I say that now I advocate issues like this. So that's why I say that there is redemption. You don't have to write off people straight away. So I'd be willing to work with people who are, the main thing is that they are open to learning and acknowledging, oh, yeah, I did wrong there. So not getting all defensive and then putting up. And so the work that we've done in bullying, we talk a lot about DAVO, which is if someone was to say, hey, harass me, or you've bullied me, or that was racist or sexist, the typical DAVO response comes up, which is deny and say, no, it wasn't. You're too sensitive, or no, or it was not my intention, that kind of thing. Intention, I always tell people, is irrelevant because it's really about the impact on the person who's been hurt. So you have to own it, right? So that's the thing. So deny and then attack and then make it about their fault. Well, you did this, that made me say this. Or look, women who dress this way deserve that kind of thing. So the whole victim blaming. And then reverse victim and offender. Look, you're now impacting my career by reporting this. So I'm the victim here. So I think once we saw that pattern, and it plays out in so many cases. So I think these are the things that I would talk to people in leadership about, to recognize this, because they'd often be talking to someone who's been accused of harassment. They say, oh, it couldn't possibly be Bob. Bob's so nice. He plays golf with us every weekend. He would never do that. But they don't recognize the patterns and the almost, I also call it grooming. So harassers would groom leaders, be really nice to them. And I've seen this seriously with my own eyes several times.
I feel like you're playing out the last 18 months of one of my corporate careers.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
This is decades of HR nonsense being replayed in 10 seconds here. But yes, it's everywhere. And you hit so many things in your story there that I'm trying to like take notes and keep up. But I think there are a couple things that I wanted to point out. A while back in my career, I had the pleasure of working with a company called Partners in Leadership, and I think they've renamed themselves since. But they have this model. It's called the results pyramid, right? And I think the results pyramid plays out in human behavior as well. So what it basically says is at the base of the pyramid are experiences. So people have experiences every day, right? Those experiences create beliefs. Then once you form a belief, your actions are going to be in line with your belief. And then you're going to get positive or negative results, right? That's essentially the model. So what you're speaking about here are people in the workplace. And I want to tackle you for a second here. When you said you were perpetuating some of the same toxic behavior in the system because you had experiences that said, this is how you have to lead, or this is what leadership looks like, or here's what I've viewed working in this space from your lens. And so you mirror that behavior. I can't tell you how many women Archita and I speak to that are in these male-dominated fields that feel as if they need to behave in a certain way because they've had experiences that then turn around and perpetuate the same system that was making us anxious and afraid and upset in the first place.
Absolutely.
This is the horror of said system and the limiting factor of the disease that I call fear that allows these systems to continue to, you're getting sucked into it and you become a soldier for the system and you don't even realize that this is happening. So on the heels of that, I think I would say to women, just to close that point home, is authenticity is your best friend. When you abandon yourself to align your behaviors to your experiences because you think this is how I must behave in order to achieve success, this is when you're surrendering your power, right? We can all disrupt the system if we decide, I'm not aligning to this craziness. I'm going to make this craziness align to me, right? With some healthy habits and leading in a different way. But it takes each of us to have courage in our own spaces to be like, I'm not going to do it this way, so that we can create new experiences for people underneath us or maybe even above us that are watching.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that you touched several things here, Olivia. One is, okay, disrupt the system. And some women do, they will disrupt, yet they're still left to dry. They're hanging there by themselves. They're the only one who disrupt. And everyone else is still, oh, we can't be like, I've been in that position a lot. And I'm like, I don't care. You don't want to come along, don't. But I think really disrupting the system takes more than one or two women. In this case, we're talking about women, right? But it could be other people who are a minority, whether we're talking about from a context of race or other areas, right? So one of the things that I realized is that women are feel they have to behave differently because they're working in a system, whether it is the company or the industry or the whole corporate world, which has been designed by men for men. And I can take it a step further. It has been designed by white men for white men, the whole world, right? It has been designed by, I can even go further. I can say it's been designed by cis, straight, white men from certain educational background for the same kind of men. Everyone else has to adapt to it, which means we lose elements of ourselves and we can't be ourselves, because you mentioned authenticity. When we recognize these patterns and we see that the systems themselves are flawed and they're upheld actually by a minority, and that we're all changing ourselves and who we are. Maybe we are downplaying some aspects of our identity, whether we're talking about our race, our gender, our sexuality, our neurodiversity, whatever it is. When we downplay them, those, our own brilliance, our own authenticity is not coming out. We're not shining and we're miserable. Let's face it. A lot of people are miserable at work because they're not allowed to be themselves, or actually, not that they're not allowed, they feel they can't be themselves. Nobody said you can't do this. Or maybe some did, but it's become like that it's almost, well, this is what corporate culture is like. Professionalism, if you think about it, is actually really constraining. When we say, well, don't put your hair like that, that's not professional. Or you're speaking with a funny accent, that's not professional. When I say funny accent from England, it basically means that you're not speaking the posh kind of English, right? Queen's English. But these are really constraining things. And I think this is where we need to challenge it every time we come across it. And for me, it's a daily affair, right? But it's exhausting. It is exhausting if we're always doing that. And so I want to share something like back in Malaysia, it would be, for me, a lot of it was about gender. Oh, come on, you guys, why are you not listening to women or whatever? I was not the only woman in senior management meetings. And so they'd roll their eyes and they're like, well, there's Animah on a high horse and whatever it is. I come to the UK and then there's a different dimension, because you see, in Malaysia, I was the majority, right? In terms of race. I come to the West. I'm not the majority. And because I'm white passing, I'm biracial, by the way, a lot of people just assume I'm white. And it's like my Asianness, they don't want that Asian side. And they like, you're Muslim? It's like a surprise. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? I'm not going to go, what? You're Christian? It's just weird. And we don't want to see that part of you. We just want that white part of you, that kind of thing, because that fits in. The rest of it doesn't. And it's erasure. It is a form of erasure. But I didn't experience that until I moved here. And I started feeling that, seeing that. And I'm like, oh my God, now I get it. Now I see what's been happening to me too. I didn't see that. So it's almost like this gaslighting. And I think, and I talk a lot now about white supremacy and in terms of systems and dealing with the fragility, the white fragility. Well, actually, no, that's not even the best phrase of putting it, but the denials and what are you talking about? That's put in our way. But this is where, if we look at the systems, I was giving a talk yesterday, and this was about conversations that have anything to do that's coming out of the global South, for example, because I'm really strongly talking about decolonizing, about global South countries. Why are we not heard? Why is everything focused on the West? Why do we only hear Western narratives? Let's try and disrupt that. Let's flip it. Let's hear more stories out of Asia and Africa and Latin America. Why, and the islands, why are we not hearing these stories? And people of the global majority from the West, why are these stories not coming up? Because actually, if we really looked at it from a majority perspective, these are the stories that should be out there more so than white Western stories. So I don't think I'm very popular when I have conversations like this, because people find it difficult. When I say people, sorry, specifically white people find it difficult to listen to this.
Let's just take a pause there really quick, because I feel like it goes across all races, all genders, where you find people that are disillusioned by their own belief systems, irrespective of how they identify. It's more so, of course, in a certain, as you've identified, our white brothers and sisters, but I see so much of my brethren from India. I'm constantly fighting their worldview of like racism and their colonized minds as well, right? But we click into the workplace, these conversations, there is a huge, you said it goes down like a lead balloon, right? And there's a lot of the reasons for that seems to stem from the fact of if you're speaking up on whether it be any of the wars, whether it be anything else that's happening in the global south, there's a fear of retaliation. And this fear manifests itself almost, and I'm going to take a gender lens here, it manifests itself very differently for women versus for men. You've been in corporate settings. So as you go and you engage these corporate settings and you try to help build these speak up cultures, what would you recommend a leader that is listening today to us do to help create a space where they depower themselves? You have said this word, they depower themselves to encourage more open dialogue.
One thing that I really want to talk about, I know we're almost at time, but I do want to talk about the genocide and Palestine. And because this podcast is called Embracing Only, one of the things that just happened on July 24th, when Netanyahu gave his speech before Congress, we saw the only Palestinian American Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, sit there. It was her birthday, by the way. Yeah. She spoke that day on Instagram as well. And she said, I needed to be there because I want to show the world what Palestinians feel. She's the only Palestinian American. And she sat there with her keffiyeh. The other thing she said is that we are not invisible. And when we talk about like embracing only Palestinian, whether they're Palestinian Americans, Canadians, Brits, because the Palestinian diaspora is quite big, because don't forget, they have been pushed out of their country several generations ago, some of them, right? And it's important for them. It is their identity. And I cannot even begin to understand how it feels for a Palestinian woman in her workplace, which is Congress, have someone she held up the sign, war criminal, and I'll say that, war criminal, come into her space and give a talk and to be about what he's doing and to be applauded by her colleagues. Imagine the deep pain that is. And that pain that this Palestinian American woman, Rashida Tlaib, felt is the same pain that Palestinians in various workplaces in the West are feeling. There's no space for them. HR is not listening to them. DEI is not listening, not giving them the space to open up and say, I'm really hurting. And this company has said nothing about this genocide. It talks about Ukraine and Russia, but it doesn't talk about how to support Palestinians. That is so incredibly painful. And I want to share a story. So I'm in Nottingham at the moment, and my alma mater, the University of Nottingham, like many universities, have some kind of complicity and divestment in arming Israel and selling arms and so on, or the research into arms manufacturers. There was a camp, the Nottingham Camp for the Liberation of Palestine, for 64 days before they got evicted. And this was such a beautiful, safe space for the community around Nottingham and beyond, other parts of England as well. And we had Palestinians come and visit, whether they were students, they were academicians, or people who lived there, to come and visit and say, this is a space where I feel safe. I want to share my story. And this is lacking. And I think workplaces really need to think about how they are harming Palestinians, and not just Palestinians, but the broader Arabs, Muslims, and other Asians and so on, who want that space. And it's not offered. The focus, I talked about decentering, the focus tends to be on white people and their feelings, but there has been very little focus from a DEI or HR perspective on how specifically Palestinians and Muslims may be feeling. So I just wanted to make that point.
I'm so glad you did. I know we started chatting about it, but we went in like a few different workplace culture directions, which were also really critical. But this is such an important point, because the picture you painted there of Rashida Tlaib sitting in Congress and having her perpetrator, in my opinion, be there and be applauded for the abuse, for the genocide, for the atrocities, it makes me sick to my stomach right now. It makes me really sick. And I hope for everyone listening to this, you recognize this moment, because you have so many individuals who identify across so many different layers of being an only, who are experiencing this in many different ways every single day. And right now, the world is giving you a direct front seat to this every time you turn your TV on. It depends on which news channel you're listening to. But for the most part, every time you turn your TV on, right? So as leaders, we have an opportunity to, if I would circle it back to what you shared, which was really listen, learn, and then lead your teams, but create those spaces to listen and recognize that in this process of listening, you are going to feel so uncomfortable and that you don't need to resolve that discomfort every single time you feel it. But recognize that the only way to work past the discomfort is to listen more, is to encourage more dialogue. And that's the least we can do in our spaces as leaders.
Listening is key. It's actually just stepping back and listening, and it's not overnight. It takes a very long time to get the trust of people, especially if the leaders have not been listening before, to suddenly go, well, we're listening now. There are two things I tell people all the time, especially leaders. Number one, this is messy. It's going to get really uncomfortable. You might even hate yourself at times because you're going to start hearing things that people didn't tell you before. And you're going to discover things about yourself that you realize, because you might have put yourself on a pedestal and then you realize, oh my God, you just have to take it because you're the leader and there's a power dynamic. You just have to listen to this and realize that being uncomfortable is part of the process. And instead of the immediate default, like, I want to get comfortable because you're still centering yourself, is decenter yourself and center that person in front of you. And this is an amazing book by Michelle, I have it here, called Wake Up. And she talks about decentering white and also other aspects, but whiteness tends to be the most dominant. And it's really hard for white people to decenter whiteness. But center, whether it is Black people or Asian people, Indigenous people, center them, which basically means being aware of one's own privilege. You're going to make mistakes. So, okay, you made the mistakes. Don't beat yourself up because it's not about you. You should be beating up. Oh no, I can't believe I said that. It would be like, okay, I said that. Do that work on your own time, but not in front of the person that you're centering. So make mistakes, learn from it. And then you grow. It's like building a muscle. When you exercise, you're going to get sore muscles after that. They're going to be uncomfortable. When you feel the discomfort, you lean in. You don't run away. You lean in because you're developing that muscle. You stretch. So that's how you stretch. That's how you grow. So most leaders I know have some kind of fitness. They love running or whatever. And so I will use whatever analogy works for them. And they go, oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. And the other thing I tell them is when someone speaks up and tells you something that's really uncomfortable, well, that sounded a bit racist, what you just said. Don't immediately shut down, but take it as a gift because that person was brave enough to give you valuable feedback, which would make you a better person. So say thank you. And on the face of it, when they do that paradigm shift, they're like, wow, I never saw it that way. I didn't think of it that way. I didn't see it as a gift. So yeah.
I know, Animah, it's been amazing. I'm taking so many notes over here. We are at time though. So I'm going to have Olivia bring us home. There is so much. I feel like we need a whole other episode. It's great. It's great. But Olivia, please do bring us home with all of the wealth of stuff that Animah has shared with us.
Yeah, so Animah, we didn't even scratch the surface with your thoughts on what's going on with the genocide happening in Palestine. And obviously there's genocides happening in Africa as well. And to your point, these stories, right, especially when you sit in the West, when you sit in the US like I do, you don't necessarily get visibility to these things. And I want to recap what you just said for us for a quick second, because I think there were so many big nuggets in it. So first, I think your story about finding spaces where you're comfortable as an individual. Find communities, right, which is what Speak Up provides, where you feel like you belong, you can share your stories, you can feel heard. Find those communities is the parallel to what Archita and I say is find your tribe. Find that place of belonging, because we as humans need to feel that belonging in order for us to start to feel psychologically safe so we can start tackling some of this work. So find your tribe. And then for leaders, I think it's so important that some of the things that you just mentioned, Animah, one, it's listen to learn, right? Just because you're hearing something that makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean you should dismiss it. Being uncomfortable is a good thing, everyone, right? We need to retrain our brains that just because the brain is uncomfortable doesn't mean you should run away from it. It's an opportunity to listen, to learn, and to maybe do something different based on what you've heard. And then I think lastly, the last thing that I heard that I really wanted to just call out for our listeners here is don't be a gatekeeper for the system. Right? Let's all self-evaluate and think about the ways that we have absorbed some of these experiences that we've had with the system. And we're now maybe playing a part unintentionally. So take a breath, take a second to reflect to see if you are maybe in your day-to-day interactions with either your employees, maybe it's your peers, maybe it's your negative self-talk to yourself that is contributing to these limiting systems that we sit in. So with that said, as we're coming to an end here, Animah, you do so many things. You do leadership coaching, you do individual coaching, you do workshops. How can people get a hold of you if they want to hear more, or if you're a leader of an organization that wants help? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest I would say is on LinkedIn. And I also have my website named after me, Animah Kosai. So that would probably be the best way to reach out, connect with me there, and then just ask any questions.
So Animah, really you are a beautiful presence, as Olivia noted over here, as she had to step away. But we are so grateful and so thankful to have you here on the Embracing Only podcast. I know that this is not the end of having you on here. There are going to be other moments and ways in which we can collaborate. And we truly appreciate how you are shining a light on so many critical conversations that need to happen across the whole swath of atrocities individuals face in this world. So thank you again.
And thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Achita, and Olivia as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.